So, setting boundaries with your boss is not about refusing to do your job. It's about being able to do your job well without burning out. Because if you burn out, you're no good to anyone. Hi, everyone. Welcome back. So, as a new leader, you might feel more self doubt and stress than you're used to feeling. And new leaders shouldn't have to struggle alone to become great leaders. And that's where this podcast comes in. I am super excited to help you become the leader everyone loves. I want to help you to feel less stressed, more confident, and to really gain that respect as a leader. Last week, we talked about setting boundaries with anyone, the 5 C's of setting boundaries, how to do it. And today, we're going to really kind of hone in on how to set boundaries with your boss and do it in a way where you're not burning bridges. Your boss still feels like I can rely on this person. They're awesome at what they do, and they're my go to person. This is really important. In fact, it's crucial to your success as a leader to learn how to set boundaries. So, what I find a lot when in talking with my clients is that a lot of times they will have their priorities. They'll be working really hard on what they need to get done, them and their team, to be successful. And their boss might call them, be in a meeting or just happen to say, you know what, I need you to do this or I need you to do that. And sometimes it's a feeling of they're piling on. And it's really can be uncomfortable, especially if you're a new leader, but not only with new leaders. Everybody I talk to, even people who've been doing this for years, tend to feel uncomfortable when the boss piles on to say, no, I can't do that. Or how do you think, this aligns with what our priorities are, or not now, or this is why that's not a good idea. So I'm going to show you today how to set boundaries with your boss without burning bridges and feeling really great doing it. Oftentimes, as a leader, you're kind of stuck in the middle because you have these expectations from your boss and people above you or the leadership above you, and you have the responsibility to support your team, give them the resources they need, and to help them to feel supported by you. Because I'm sure if you've had a great boss in the past, you know what that feels like to be supported. Everybody wants to feel like their boss has their back. That being said, you have responsibilities, and sometimes you and your team might have to do some things that you don't really want to do. That's part of the process. But really, what's important for you as a new leader is to develop the skill, and this is really crucial, to learn when it's appropriate to say no. Because oftentimes with new leaders, you say yes to everything because you don't want to be seen by your boss or by upper leadership as not competent or not being able to handle all the responsibilities in your role. But the thing with setting boundaries is oftentimes your boss doesn't have the insight that you have. So you see things that your boss doesn't see. You have a closer communication and probably closer relationship with your team. And sometimes you even have a closer relationship or access to the client or the customer. So it's really your responsibility as an outstanding leader to set boundaries and to communicate really clearly why maybe sometimes some things that your boss is asking you to do doesn't really align with what's the priorities are or isn't going to work, and this is why. And it can be scary, it can be really uncomfortable, but that's something that you really have to learn if you plan on being an exceptional leader, which you are. And as I always tell you, I know that you have the capacity to be an outstanding leader and to become a leader that everybody loves, including your team, including your boss, including your clients and colleagues. And so the first really important step, as I told you in some of the last videos, is to prioritize, know what's really most important. But then once you know what's most important, and if you need to get back to that and really understand, how do I prioritize? There's 2 things you could do. Number one, I'm going to leave you the link to the new leader starter kit in the show notes. It's free. So that's a great starting point. And there's also a couple of videos that I've made about how to prioritize on YouTube and on the podcast. So you could take a listen to those as well, or watch those. So there's a few reasons why setting boundaries as a leader are really important. Number one is really you need to set boundaries for your own well-being and for your own success in your role. But that also impacts the success and well-being of your team, because if you feel like you're taking on too much, you're starting to get overwhelmed, that stress trickles down to your team. And I have many clients who have told me, no, Mel, I'm really good at kind of keeping that under wraps. I don't let my stress get to me. I don't push that down to my team. But in speaking with thousands of employees at this point, they do sense it, because 93% of our communication is nonverbal. So even if we think we're really good at not pushing that anxiety or stress that we have or overwhelm onto our team, they do feel it. And that's not going to help anybody to be successful or to feel really good. You want to help your team to feel motivated and engaged. And the best way to do that is for you to feel less stress and more confident. So the first kind of how to do that is to learn how to communicate really clearly and set boundaries when appropriate. So when I'm telling you to set boundaries, I'm not saying that you have to pick your battles. You're not going to tell your boss, no, that doesn't work. No, that doesn't work. No, that doesn't work. You're going to get very aligned on what your priorities are. You're going to have a very, because so good at communicating, you're communicating with your team, and you're going to know when it's too much. But if you're feeling a high level of pressure and overwhelm, you really need to listen to that feeling as well. Sometimes, especially as new leaders, we put a lot of pressure on ourselves to say yes all the time. And again, I've told you about the three needs that we all have when we're young, these fundamental needs. The need to feel safe and secure, the need to feel worthy or good enough, or that approval, or the need to feel, what's the other one? Oh, love and connection. So a lot of times, even if we're really good at what we do and we know we're stressed and overwhelmed, we don't say anything because we want to feel that security, right? And we say to ourselves, well, they might get mad at me, they might think I'm a troublemaker, or maybe they're going to think that I can't handle things. And somewhere in the back of our mind, even if it's our subconscious, is a part of us saying, well, what if we got fired, or what if we got demoted, or because we all want to make enough money to live, and our job is a big factor in that feeling of security. So there's a lot of stuff going on below the surface, but I'm here to tell you that you can and should and will learn how to set boundaries so that you can feel really good and so that your team can feel better as well. So I'm going to teach you some things that your boss might not even know. And that's really part of becoming an outstanding leader, is learning things that not everybody practices. And sometimes they're really uncomfortable practicing. So I want you to get into the mindset of being able to lead up, down, and sideways, meaning when I can do this, even if my boss is not doing this, even if the leadership doesn't know how to do this, I'm going to learn. I'm going to focus on my side of the street. I'm going to learn how to lead myself at my best, so you can feel that less stress and more confident, but so you can also have more positive influence on others, including your boss. So a lot of these things, believe it or not, in my experience, I see a lot of people at all levels, including CEOs, don't always know how to do this effectively, setting boundaries. So I think it would be helpful here to give you an example of in the real world of somebody that felt uncomfortable setting boundaries with their boss. I have a client that we recently had lunch. Her name's Katie, really great person. And she seems really stressed out to me, but she was kind of presenting like nothing was wrong. You know how when someone puts on that smile and when you know them pretty well, you know something's just not right. And I asked her, what's up? And she said, well, honestly, I am stressed. I was working all weekend. I didn't have any time for my family, and I was really frustrated, and it even impacted my sleep. Like I was having trouble sleeping. And the reason that she was feeling these feelings is because her boss kind of piled on this project on a Friday, and he wasn't really understanding, or really he didn't have a really realistic expectation of how long this project took and how many other projects and things that Katie was working on. So she was feeling really frustrated and overwhelmed, but she wasn't really willing, or she didn't know how to approach this subject with her boss, because she felt like, if I say anything, he's going to think that I can't handle things, because he does this a lot and he kind of moves quickly and he just says, do this is important, do that. So she feels like intimidated by him. And when we talked a little bit more about it, what I realized was Katie had some judgments around, and that was kind of, the judgments were causing her fear of talking with her boss. So her boss is really brilliant guy. He's a Harvard trained engineer, and Katie is intimidated and feels like he's not going to think I'm smart. He's not going to think I can handle things because he's smart. So she feels like she doesn't, measure up. But he hired her. So I oftentimes we tell ourselves stories in our head, and those stories aren't necessarily true. We tell ourselves stories and we make judgments about how someone's going to react, because she thought, if I tell him, he's going to say, you know what, you should be able to handle all of this. And even if he does say that, which doesn't mean he's going to say that, that's not a that's not true, and that's not, maybe he doesn't have all the information. So the thing is, we always have a choice, and not doing anything is a choice, and that's a choice that Katie was making. But she had been, it wasn't just the first weekend that she was feeling stressed. She had been feeling stressed and overwhelmed for a while, and kind of just like kept moving forward, and it was starting to get to a head. So I just want to make you aware that whenever you're feeling this way, or you feel like, I can't really say anything because this is how they're going to react, this is what they're going to think about me, those are judgments. And we don't know for a fact that they're going to think that, or that that's how they're going to react. And in my experience, I find that most of the time they don't react the way we think they are going to react, and they're not always thinking what we think they're going to think. Sometimes it's our own insecurities or feelings of, not really feeling confident. Like I said, a lot of new leaders feel more self-doubt and stress than they're used to feeling. So if we're not confident in our role, and our boss is making it sound like, oh yeah, you can get this done, no problem, it's going to make us feel like, yeah, I should be able to get this done, no problem. But what's really important is for you to clearly communicate. And what keeps us from clearly communicating, and what I see with everybody at every organization I worked with, is that we're all really busy. So that can get in our way, because when you're busy and your boss is busy, that really impacts the quality of our communication. We're rushed oftentimes. And like I said, her boss didn't understand how long things took. And Katie wasn't really comfortable talking to him about all the other things, and maybe reprioritizing, or saying, this doesn't make sense, or this is going to take a little longer. So I keep telling you that you can be an outstanding leader. You can be less stressed, more confident, and become the leader that everybody loves. So what does that entail? That means that it's your responsibility, because if your boss isn't doing it, then you have a choice to make. Like I said, you could do nothing. And so if you're feeling that stress and that feeling of not really being sure of yourself, that's not going to get better if you do nothing. You can talk to your boss, learn how to have consistent, clear conversations, or you could leave. That's always an option. Not to say that's what you should do, but the learning to have consistent, clear communication with your boss can be hard, it can be scary, and it can feel really uncomfortable. But that is your path to becoming a really well-respected leader and to feeling your best. So there's 3 things that you can do up front that will make it much easier for you to set boundaries with your boss. So this is you leading up, right? So that's what amazing, outstanding leaders do. And you can do this with anyone, but let's just talk about your boss for now. I told you many times so far that one of the biggest challenge I see with new leaders, or leaders at any level, I shouldn't say new leaders, any leader, including CEOs, is clear, concise communication. So the 3 things that I'm going to teach you that you need to be doing on a regular basis are going to help you to communicate better, do much more than just set boundaries. It's going to help you to have difficult conversations, how to give positive and negative feedback, how to hold people accountable, how to discuss challenging, issues. But if you get in the habit of doing this, it's going to make holding people, it's going to help you so much to set boundaries. So the first, and this is before I get to this, I want to make a point on this. What I've noticed with hundreds of leaders at this point is that most people are under communicating with their team, and they're under communicating with their bosses, and they think that they're communicating well because maybe they're sending lots of emails, maybe they're talking about certain things, but a lot of the things that we're talking about aren't really the things that are important to talk about, because it's so hard to hold people accountable, because it's so hard to talk about the tough things. We're not always communicating those things, and we end up talking about things that don't matter as much. So you might, when I tell you about these three things that you should do, you might think, oh, that's overkill, because a lot of people will tell me, that's too much. Why do I want to do that? These are the things that are going to help separate you from everybody else. These are the things that are going to make people respect you as a leader and really become that leader that everybody loves. But what is more important for me, for you, is that you're going to feel less stressed and more confident. This is the secret. So number one, three things, like I said. Number one is to communicate more regularly with your boss. You're going to schedule regular check-ins. Number two is to follow up in writing. And number three is to keep it really simple. Okay. So, and keeping it simple isn't as easy as you might think. So, the reason why I would like you to set up regular check ins, and, weekly would be great, even if it's just 15 minutes. So this doesn't mean it has to be a long, drawn out conversation, but because you're all so busy, right? It's hard to get time to really focus on what really matters. And oftentimes, because there's a hierarchy, people don't feel comfortable initiating that communication with their boss. I'm telling you that you will be exceptional if you are willing to lead up, and you're willing to lead up, down, and sideways. And I encourage you to initiate that communication. So if you initiate, let's talk for 15 minutes once a week, or 30 minutes, whatever works for you, but you do a little work up front to identify what your priorities are. You should know what your priorities are for the next 3 months. You should be able to say that to anybody. You should understand what that is. And your boss should know what those are too. And you should also be able to clearly communicate when challenges arise, and when there's something that you need to kind of focus on this week or next week or whatever that is, so that when your boss piles on, they already know everything that you have going on, and they should know in detail. So again, you're not going to overwhelm them with information. You're going to keep it really simple. So I'm going to go to step 3, which is to keep it simple. When you communicate in person and via email, or whenever you communicate in writing, I want you to keep it really simple. As human beings right nowadays, we don't have any attention span. Think of all the emails you get in a day. You barely scan them, right? So people need to be able to see and read something on a phone, let's say, right on the screen. And what I'm going to tell you to do is to learn how to recap a meeting in less than five bullet points or less. Okay, I'll give you 6, but I really want you to keep it simple. And they're not going to be bullet points and paragraphs. They're going to be 1 to 2 sentences in each bullet point. And that's not always easy to do. It's actually harder to communicate shorter, more concisely than it is to communicate in, big paragraphs. The bottom line is, what's important. And oftentimes we don't want to speak directly, so we end up talking around things. I want you to get comfortable being very specific and very simple. So that's number 3. I moved to that because the second thing is to follow up in writing. So if you think it's overkill, I don't want you to that's like fear talking. That's a feeling of, they're going to think that I'm kind of overstepping my bounds, or they're going to think that or we assume people know what we know, and that is not true. Again, I've seen this many times with clients, and when I interview people at all levels, lots of employees, in the thousands, they always say that they want more communication. So this is a great starting point. So the 3 steps are to schedule regular check-ins, keep it really simple, and to follow up in writing. And those are really good habits to get into with all the people that you interact with. I want you to know that you have the right to push back if something doesn't feel right, if something doesn't fit with what the priority should be for your team, for the and for the organization. It's all right to say no or not now, and this is why. So when you hold a boundary or set a boundary, it doesn't have to be an aggressive thing, and it doesn't have to be me against you. When you shift your mindset to we're in this together and this is why I think this won't work, let's talk about it, that the your boss is going to have a whole different reaction than if you said, you know what, no, that doesn't work and this is why. So if you can shift your mindset before you have the conversation to we're on the same team, this is why that won't work, let's talk about it, they're going to have a much different reaction, you're going to get a better result. So it's about communicating boundaries while showing commitment to your job while you're showing respect for your boss's needs. So it's a collaboration. So let's talk about some language you can use to start setting boundaries. So the first thing you could do is you could push back in a way that you're asking a question. So you could say, I'm really committed to doing this project. These are my priorities. Let's talk about what you think I might need to push back in order to get this done on time. You also can provide context. Sometimes your boss isn't really aware of all the things that you're juggling. So, one way to provide context is to say something like, I want to make sure that I deliver quality work on this project and I have these other responsibilities. Can we discuss the timeline so that I ensure that I am meeting your expectations? So also you could suggest a solution. So that shows that you're really committed and you are on board to help make this work. One of the things you could say is, given my current tasks, it might be challenging to get this done by the deadline. Could we consider delegating or maybe even extending the deadline? So that way you're showing up in a way that you want to help to find a solution. So setting boundaries with your boss is not about refusing to do your job. It's about being able to do your job well without burning out. Because if you burn out, you're no good to anyone. So I just want to remind you that setting boundaries doesn't have to be an aggressive or harsh thing. It's actually really important for you to learn how to first set boundaries with yourself, set boundaries with your time. I talked about that last week because when you do that, then you're going to get a little bit more comfortable setting boundaries with others. So I'm not expecting you to run out there and just setting boundaries with everybody. I want you to just start to get really clear about what's most important for you to do. How are you feeling? Are you feeling more stressed and overwhelmed, and why? And maybe just start really small for right now, just to get more comfortable, because the more you try something that you're uncomfortable with, the more you build that muscle, and that's what creates that confidence. Again, I want to leave you with this. Before I get to that though, I want to remind you that you can start to do some of this work by gaining access to the free new leader starter kit, which I'm going to leave in the show notes. So that's something that can get you started on your road to becoming an outstanding leader that everybody loves. I want you to feel less stressed, more peace, and to have that confidence as a leader and to have that respect from others. So the best way to do that is to start with self respect. And when you learn how to set boundaries with others in a positive way that's collaborative, and you learn how to communicate clearly and continuously, that is a great way to show yourself love and respect. So I'm going to leave you with that for today. I hope you're having an amazing day, and I will see you next week. Bye, guys.